So it's time for the second part of the story, and you might want to get yourself for this part just a piece of bread. This is a regular slice of white bread, and a cup of juice, red juice if you've got it. It doesn't need to be a fancy cup like mine. Whatever you've got at home is fine. Now, it told us in the last story, the one about the donkey, that Jesus and his friends were going to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, which was a Jewish religious festival. Jesus and his friends, of course, were Jewish. Now, part of the Passover involved having a special meal together. Lots of religious festivals involve that, don't they? We might have Christmas dinner at Christmas, Easter eggs at Easter, breaking the fast in Ramadan. It's a common thing. Because they didn't live in Jerusalem, Jesus and his friends had to find somewhere where they could eat their meal. So he did the weird instructions thing again. He called two of his friends to him. We know it was Peter and John. And he said, "You two go into the city. You'll find a man carrying a water jar. Follow him home into his house. And when he asks what you want, say you've come to see the room for the teacher to have his meal." Those are strange instructions, aren't they? I was thinking, how would they know they'd got the right person? Then I found this out. You see, carrying the water jar was women's work. Normally women did it. If you saw a man with a jar, that was really unusual. So when Peter and John went into the city and they saw a man carrying a jar, they knew he was the right one to follow. They went to his house, through the door, and he turned round and saw them and said, "What do you want?" And they said, "We've come to see the room where the teacher can have his meal." And he said, "You can use my room upstairs." We don't know why he let them use it. Maybe Jesus had prearranged it. Maybe he's Jesus's friend. Maybe he's just got a spare room that he rents out during times like the Passover to make a bit of extra money. Who knows? But he lets them use it. So Peter and John set up for the Passover meal. They get all the special foods together and they lay the table. And later that night, Jesus and his friends gather in the upper room of the man's house. They would have gathered round a table. This is my dining room table where I'm sat now. Their table would have been quite a lot lower than mine, and they wouldn't have sat on chairs. They would have reclined on cushions around the table. You know what it's like when you get your friends and family together for a celebration meal, for Christmas or a birthday. It's not quiet, is it? It's not calm. Everybody's talking, everybody's laughing, telling stories and jokes. Maybe a couple of people are fighting at one end of the table. Someone else is sulking because they've got to sit next to somebody they don't really like. It's definitely not quiet. And I think that's probably what it's like for Jesus and his friends at the start of this meal. They've had the entry into Jerusalem on the back of the horse. Everyone was cheering for them. Jesus has been going around. Crowds are gathering to hear him. Things are good. And so, in the middle of the meal, when Jesus starts to say quite strange things, it becomes pretty unsettling because they thought everything was going so well. You see, Jesus, he turns to them and he says, "Friends, I'm really glad that I got to eat this meal with you again. This is the last time I will share the Passover meal until it reaches its full meaning in the kingdom of God." They must be thinking, what does he mean by that? He's always saying strange things. Then he says something even stranger because he picks up the bread. Just bread. He holds it up. His bread would have been flat bread, not like this, more like a kind of wrap or something like that. But he picked up the bread, that most ordinary of things, off the table, and he said, this bread is my body. Eat it and remember me." That is weird, isn't it? Imagine on Christmas Day if your mum picked up a bit of turkey and she went, "This turkey is like my body. Eat it and remember me." And then she passed it round. You'd laugh at her, wouldn't you? Because it'd be weird. But that's what Jesus did. "This bread is like my body. Eat it and remember me." And he broke it. And he passed it round. And they all ate some. You've got some bread. You might want to eat some now. It's pretty good. Share it with the people that you're with. After they'd eaten the bread, Jesus picked up a cup. His cup would have had wine in it. Mine has juice. Hopefully yours does too. And he picked it up and he said, "This wine is like my blood. Drink it and remember me. And he passed it round and they all had a drink. You could do that now too. Now, Jesus' friends must have wondered what on earth he was going on about. They didn't know what was coming next, but he did. Lots of Christians believe slightly different things about what Jesus was doing when he shared the bread and wine. Churches across the world still do this now. They might call it Holy Communion or the Lord's Supper or Mass, but it is remembered in churches everywhere. Here is what I think Jesus was doing. Out of all the foods and drink on that table, all the special Passover foods that there were, he chose bread. Just ordinary bread, the kind of thing that they ate every single day. And he chose wine, just wine. It's a special drink now, but in those days they used to drink it every day because the water wasn't always clean. Off that table he chooses ordinary things, bread and wine, because he wants them to remember him. He knows what's going to happen next. He knows that he's going to die. He knows he's going to leave them. And I think it works, doesn't it, this using food and drink to remember people. I don't know about you, but every time I have a cup of tea, I think about my dad. Because he taught me how to make tea. He drinks tea all the time. And every time I have a cup of tea, I think, oh, I bet my dad's having a cup of tea too. Or my nana, who died when I was about 8, before we died, she used to make us Sunday dinner and she used to put herbs in her gravy and it used to have a really distinctive smell. And now, even now all these years later, if I smell those herbs, straight away I think about my nan and her Sunday dinners and her house and all the things we used to do together and the toys we used to play with and the games we used to play and reading together, and it all floods through my mind just from the smell of the herbs in the gravy. Food and drink, our senses are powerful things. Jesus is choosing things that they will eat and hold and smell every day to say, don't forget me, remember me. Remember everything we've done together, everything you've seen, everything I've taught you. Remember me and carry on my work. Then, after they've eaten and drunk, he turns to them again and he says, one of you, my friends, is going to let me down. One of you will betray me. I am going to die, and one of you will hand me over to my enemies to be killed. They must be looking at each other thinking, who is it? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? What if it's me? What if I do it and I don't even mean to? What does he mean? And suddenly, things are feeling pretty different, aren't they? We know the end of the story. We know what happened next, but they didn't. Here's what they do know. When Jesus says something, it happens. Jesus says, you'll find a donkey tied to a wall. Bring it here and I will ride on it. And it happens. Jesus says, you'll see a man carrying a water jar. Follow him and we'll have dinner at his house. And it happens. So when Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me and I will be killed, they know, don't they? It's going to happen. And suddenly this bit of the story feels quite different, doesn't it? At the end of the first bit, Palm Sunday, it was happy, it was excited, there was cheering, everyone was pleased to see Jesus. How quickly things have changed. Feels pretty different now. Frightening, nervous, worried. What does it mean? So remember bread and wine. Remember Jesus. Remember how it feels at this bit of the story. And to help us think about it for a little bit longer and explore it a little bit more, we've got a craft activity coming up next for you. You might want to finish your bread and wine and have a think about this bit of the story whilst you're doing it.